All right. Well, here we are. We are officially live, Liran. Liran. Did I mispronounce that right off the bat? Liran. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I was second guessing myself. Well, thanks for jumping on. Why don't we kick off the conversation with you? I'd love to hear the founding story, where what you were doing prior to Lili and what the sort of spark was that got you excited to work on this concept.
So, as you said, I'm Liran. I have been, I think, a freelancer for most of my professional career, writing code, just writing code for money. Will code for food kind of thing. And at some point I felt that banks could be so much better than what they are when they offer, when they provide service to me. And then I started a bank in Israel called Pepper, which was an online bank, no branches. And my co-founder, Lilac, and myself, we felt that, we can do it in the US and we can do better. And then I thought, why not build a bank for freelancers? Why not see how we can give freelancers a better, experience with their bank?
I have to stop you there for a second. Yeah. You just built a bank. What are the major checkboxes you need to overcome? Certainly the software and design component, but is there major internal audits, or I'm sure there's some heavy regulatory checkboxes you have to fill out? What was that process like?
Yeah, so one would think that you start a startup, you think about the software and the tech and how you build it and so on. But when you start building a bank, then you start thinking more around the lines of the regulation that you need and the laws around building a bank, because, you hold people's money. But for us, I think that the main thing is the state of mind. It doesn't matter if you're looking at the regulation or the team that you're hiring. There's a regulation around that as well, of course, or the code that you're writing. You need to be aware of the responsibility that you have, right? You're holding people's money. And if there's a glitch in the system, it's not like, oh man, I can't see my, social network posts or something like that. Someone stands at the store with a debit card in his hand trying to pay for coffee or for food for his family, and he can't. Now, that's like a huge responsibility that you take on yourself. So trying to get that into our heads and to get it into the team's heads is, I think, the biggest challenge when you start a bank.
So practically, did that look like a ton of QA? Or if you were to approach building bank software versus a social media app, what do you, from a technical standpoint, what do you do differently?
In the interviews that we're giving to tech people, the first thing that we're bragging about is the amount of coverage of testing we have for our code. So there's so much automation around the QA that we're doing. There's not a lot of QA people on the team, but there are tons of automatic testing that we're doing before every deployment. And we're deploying a lot. We're sending our code to production all the time. But we're investing huge amounts of time, of the developer's time, in writing automations and testing automations. And at the end, it proves itself because you feel very comfortable deploying code. My most extreme story was I wanted to deploy code to production and then go to my Pilates class. I said, should I wait or should I not wait? And I said, well, and I deployed the code and went to Pilates class. It wasn't available for an hour on the phone. And everything worked smoothly. So that's like the level of confidence that you need to have in your code when you're building a bank.
I for sure did not think I thought that story was going to go a lot differently. I thought they were going to rush in.
Otherwise, yeah.
That's funny. So you had previously been working in the banking sector, right? You didn't come at this cold. You were in the inside, which probably gave you a lot of tactical insight and confidence to approach this problem. Is there structurally behind the scenes, are there big differences in how banking looks country to country? I know you're in Israel and you know a lot about the Israeli banking structure, but do you see kind of the same thing happening country to country, or is it significantly different in how people are approaching banking in some way?
So just to be to be totally frank here, most of my career wasn't in a bank, right? I worked in startups. I had a startup. I did a lot of consulting gigs. But for 3 years before Lili, I was the CTO and part of the founding team of Pepper. So can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. It was a little convoluted, but I was curious if you've noticed something about the Israeli structure to banking versus maybe the U.S. or other countries, and how hard it is, or if there's nuances to building a bank country to country. I'm curious if you have a take on that.
Yeah. So banking is very local. You would think that it's the banks that are international and every country has the same banking system. It doesn't. Every country has extreme specialities in all kind of weird, behaviors. In Israel, to open a bank account, the process that you need to have is enormous, and they're checking your data against the government's database. And when we came to the US, you said, "Wow, the process for authenticating people is so simple." But then you have complexity somewhere else. The only thing I can say is that it's heavily regulated. 80% or 90% is basically the same, but the 10% is like crazy different, both in the US and in Israel. I don't know anything about Europe, of course, but it seems that in every country, the regulatory, bodies wanted to prove that they have something to offer, and then, made huge differences between the countries.
Yeah. What would be an example? Does anything come to mind of that 10% difference that's significant?
Yeah, for sure. For instance, let's say that in the US, if I have your account number and routing number, I can pull practically money from your account to any other bank. And you can, say after the fact that it's not you and dispute it with your bank. In Israel, that's like you need to have an approval from the target of the account to pull money from that account. Okay, so the account needs to approve you in advance to allow you to pull money from that account. So on one hand, that's more secure. On the other hand, it's much more cumbersome to do money transfers. So that's like a kind of a regulatory decision that needs to be made. And, Israel went one way and the US went another way.
Oh, that's interesting. I never thought about that, but you're right. I remember using Stripe a few years ago, and we had users just enter account and routing numbers. And it just felt always kind of like, wow, you just enter those numbers and then we can, you click an approval button and then bam, we could take money out of your account every week. Yeah. Now that you say it, it is kind of it is kind of loose rails there. But I suppose for the most part, fraud is under control. I don't hear about companies having systemic problems with fraud of people pulling money out of accounts they shouldn't. Do you have?
There are tons of startups in the US, fintech startups in the US that handle fraud. So there are tons of issues around fraud, I guess, but I'm not sure this is specifically one of them. But the ease of not. Money transfer is important when you want to run things quickly.
Yeah, that's very true. On Lili, speaking of money transfers, how do you view Lili's unique? Let me ask you it this way. What is it about the gig economy and freelance workers that that are a unique demand on the banking needs. Certainly, I can see that if they're working for Uber, Lyft, et cetera, they want to have each of those data feeds pulling in, so you can see how much money they're expecting. I imagine you guys are thinking a lot about integrations to those type of platforms, the Fiverr, the Ubers of the world. What are the big categories of differentiation in your mind between Lili and, say, another online neobank?
So banking has been around since, I don't know, like 500, 600 years, probably more. Okay, I don't know. And they basically offer the same services, right? You give the bank your money and they keep it for you. And you can theoretically pull it off whenever you want for a small or large fee. In Lili, we look at banking a bit differently. We're offering you like the basic bank functionalities. You get a card, you have saving accounts, you can get an overdraft and so on. We call it balance up, whatever. But on top of that, we offer you business tools because we say, as a freelancers, there are several financial tools that you're using, and the best way to get them if they're well integrated in a bank. So what are, like your most painful problems around being a freelancer? You get, let's say, $100. You did a gig, you get $100. They're going to your account, but you don't really, so you see in your balance $100, but you don't really have $100. You have $50, and Uncle Sam lended you $50, and you need to pay him, in a month, in 2 months, whatever, at the end of the year, whatever. And turns out that people are lousy at understanding that they need to keep their money to their taxes. When I was a freelancer, I dreaded the end of the year. I dreaded calls from my accountant saying, you need to pay $15K or more or less, whatever, because you didn't pay enough taxes throughout the year. You don't have that kind of money just waiting around for the tax man. And so our belief in Lili was to say we'll save you automatically part of your money and put it inside a special saving account. Mm-hmm. And then you only see $50 on your balance, and there are other $50, the Uncle Sam $50 are stored somewhere so you don't spend it, and you understand that when you need to pay the money, you have it. And when you're not a bank, it's very, very difficult to do that in an online manner, which, everyone expects today to have online solutions. Mm-hmm. So we have like those kind of business tools around taxes and so on that are special to freelancers. And the various platforms, the marketplaces like Uber, like Lyft, like Fiverr, when the freelancers move money from those platforms into Lili, we automatically save the taxes for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so taxes are a big category of differentiation for freelancers because they're not paying those. They don't have withholding from an employer. Interesting. And then is there, when you think about building this product from the start, how did you go about architecting this from a technical perspective? I'm curious how you decided what software languages to use, if there was any consideration, maybe any learnings in hindsight with how you think about building a neobank. What do you, you're the mastermind of the technical software spaghetti.
So there was a saying that when we just started Lili, someone told me, they said that the tech stack of a startup is defined by the languages the CTO knows.
Yeah, that's the truth. Yeah, I know.
So I know Java, mm-hmm. and the Lili tech stack is Java. So last weekend Log4j issue was dramatic, but we came to this process with Java on one hand, and the decision not to write any code that we can get out, that we can get as a software or as a service never write something that we can use. So we started using Galileo processing, which is SoFi bought them at some point, but they are a very big, financial infrastructure for neobanks. So a lot of the banking infrastructure was provided by Galileo, and we wanted to pick a programming language that will allow us to easily integrate with everything that, whatever comes around. Because it's still banking. So you can expect to get, like the newest tech from all kind of, new vendors. But at the end of the day, you still work with some tech that was written around the 70s or the 80s. And you need to support that. So we wanted to find something that is on one hand modern or modern-ish, and on the other hand has enough legacy support to work with legacy technologies that we needed working in as a bank. And we're pretty happy with the solution. Of course, everything else runs on the cloud and microservices and so on. Our plan was to architect for 100,000 customers. And when we reach 500,000, we understood that it's time to, do to reach that point of re-architecting, which was always postponed.
What breaks first when you get to, if you design for 100,000, are you thinking like database architecture, and then you're getting to 5,000 in your queries in the database, or just taking, seconds instead of milliseconds? Or is the lag on the customer experience where the price is if you don't architect it for scale?
So, to be honest, I think we did a pretty good job in architecting. We support much more than 100,000 now. But the first thing that broke was the process that regulatory you're required to send monthly statements to all of the customers. That broke. That was the first thing that broke. And it wasn't even the queries themselves that ran pretty fast. It was the number of queries that you need to run were so big that there was a timeout at some point and just needed to rerun the whole thing. And then there was a memory leak somewhere or whatever, and the server crashed. The first thing that breaks actually is the monitoring. You monitor for something, and you always look at the response time of the customers, but all those batch things that happen in the back end, and as a bank, you have a lot of batch things that happen in the back end. Those broke first because we were monitoring so much the response time for the customers. I don't think there is a degradation of performance since day one of Lili when we only had 10 customers. But the batches take much more time to run, like 5 minutes to an hour now.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that would be like a batch would be. What's a batch? Is that a?
So it's something that runs offline. Let's say that you need to create a PDF file for all of your customers. It doesn't make sense to do that when the customer requests the files, because many customers don't request it because no one would like a PDF from his bank, but the regulation requires you to create it. So how do you go creating such a file? So you have, let's say, at the end of the first day of every month, you need to go over all the 500K or 600K customers that you have and generate PDF files for all of them. And that could take, a long time.
I see. And basically you're querying that ahead of time so that when someone does request it, it's just available because you're running it behind the scenes?
Yes. That's kind of the concept.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But the architecture of it, is very, now, it wasn't, when we started. It's not, we never imagined that it would take so long, but the architecture now is like extremely distributed, that every customer runs on his own Lambda function and so on. But when we started, architecting it, it all ran like in a loop, hoping it will finish fast. We were happy to be disappointed.
One question I want to ask you, this is probably a simple answer, but it's just on my mind. So if I open an account with Lili, I transfer in $1,000 and that transfer comes in from another bank. Lili recognizes that through some API and says, okay, inbound, and it probably says amount, bank that it transfers from, time, sender, whatever metadata. Then is Lili just maintaining, and this is probably not just Lili, but is the way you design a online bank where you just have a database of users and then how much money is in each account, just like a ledger? So you could just add a zero to an account. Is it as, not that is simple, but is that the general way that the ledger system is architected in online banks or banks in general?
So first of all, it's a great idea to add a zero. I'll write it down. I might do that to my account. But I think that, no. First of all, you have a single account. You need a sponsor bank when you build a bank. Okay. When you have a neobank, you have a sponsor bank. All the fintechs in the US, well, most of them, 95% of them or so, have a sponsor bank that supports them. And in that sponsor bank, you have an account, a single account that is called an FBO account. And all of the customers' accounts are mapped to that FBO account. And that FBO account is insured by the federal government. So first of all, the customer's money is insured. But if you want the federal government to insure that money, then you need to have some kind of mechanisms to manage the ledger correctly. And of course, there are two balances to each account, not just one. You have current balance and available balance because when you go to a hotel, for instance, then they put a hold on your account for $500, let's say. And that reduces your balance, your available balance, and doesn't reduce your current balance. Okay? So there's so much money you can spend, and there's the money that you actually have. And it's not necessarily the same amount all the time. For us specifically, we use Galileo for the ledger, and some of the ledger is maintained in Lili. And some developer might want to add a zero someplace, somehow, but it will take us on average 2 or 3 hours to find out that something is incorrect in the ledger, and it will take us another 20 minutes or so to find out where the issue came from. You can't just add a zero.
And I imagine that would be, if a hacker could, have their wish, they would have access to that database and they could change an account value and try to get money out in time. I can't recall, I'm sure you know an example of this, but I can't recall any online neobank being hacked. And this might just be a tribute to the founders and the engineering teams. But if they were to be hacked, it would probably be that, right? It would be somebody accessing this canonical database and then changing figures and trying to get money out quickly, which probably is I'm sure very difficult to do.
I would bet that they would try to either steal personal information about customers, or try to take existing balances and ship them outside by stealing card information or something like that, which is more like playing with the ledger.
Yeah,
there's so much monitoring around it that I believe it's going to be extremely difficult and not very profitable because someone will catch you very, very fast. There's always account hijacking that for every software, of course, which is a problem. And there are tons of solutions out there for you to try to solve it.
Is there a lot of, this is something I think most people have no idea about, but you're building, an online bank, and if I'm a hacker somewhere in my mom's basement and I just want to see if I can steal money, certainly crypto is an appealing area to try to, play with because it's so decentralized and so new. So there's probably a lot of attack surfaces. How often do you see, or what is the intensity of attacks by hackers? Is it like once a week you'll see some effort, or is it like every day or once a year? Is that something you'd even think about in that way? What's your take on that?
So we invest a lot of information security, right, to defend our environment. There are multiple types of attacks. There's always attacks, okay? There's always someone who scans your ports. Does that mean it's an attack? That's not really an attack. I would say that, and everyone who starts, sniffing our ports. But that's not a very common or complicated attack. There are phishing attempts. There are tons of vectors. We have a security team internal. We decided to invest very early in an internal security team because it's an issue. It's always an issue, and being a bank it's more of an issue. But all in all, I don't think there are a lot of attacks against Lili right now. Not that I'm aware of, at least.
It's probably. I'm thinking if I'm a very smart hacker and I'm just trying to extort some organization, I'm not going for a new startup because they have new technology. They have probably very smart, ambitious people. I'm going for Target. I'm going for a major retailer that just built a website like 5 years ago. The credit systems, some of these companies that are like 30 years old that reluctantly built a website like a decade ago, and they have some engineering team that's not a part of the core business. And that's kind of what you see. Hospitals have a big problem with this. And usually I feel like the playbook is get access to people's data and then try to get a Bitcoin transfer. It's usually what I've seen. We'll give it back to you if you send us Bitcoin.
I think, being a small startup, then the architecture is still very small. It's very tight. It's very easy to understand the assets that you have. And trying to understand what's going on is something that, a single person can still comprehend in his mind. When you're big and you've been around for a very long time, then you have tons of systems and you have backdoors that no one knew of or no one maintains. As a freelancer, 10 years ago, I wrote some code. That's a funny story. I wrote some code for a company. I won't mention its name, but it's a big company, and they wanted me to write some kind of an authentication gateway between their internal system and the Salesforce deployment that they did. I wrote it, 10 or 9 years ago, and every 2 years or so, they call me about some kind of bug. I don't have the code naturally. I haven't been a freelancer for 6 or 7 years now. And I said, okay, I thought of them during this weekend, this log4j weekend, and saying, I wonder if they're going to call, because I don't know the code. I don't even remember which tech I used to write it and what are the implications and who understands, and if the one I transfer the knowledge to even works there anymore. So when you have a big enterprise with thousands of such small systems, I would definitely focus my efforts there inside of a small startup that deploys 5 times a day and know every server that is up because someone is paying for it and who paid and how much.
Yeah, you guys are like the Marines. You're the well-trained focus group. Go after. Yeah, that's a good point. If somebody builds something important at a big company and then they leave and the department loses funding or whatever, it's still there from a technology standpoint, and you can't see it. Unlike a physical bank or a physical anything, it's not obvious to the people that aren't in the code base. So it's an elusive problem. So I have some degree of empathy for these large companies.
Yeah. It's funny that you say Marines because, a year ago we were 10 people in Lili or 15 employees. And we used to say that every employee is like James Bond, alone can do anything. And now we're starting to think of ourselves as Marines, as a core, as a team. Everyone has his own speciality, and that allows you to scale both, from a tech side and from an organization side.
Yeah. What does the team size and structure look like today?
So we have about 60 people. Naturally, a lot of them are in tech, but you have a lot in customer support and banking operations, because at the end of the day, someone has problem logging into his app or swiping his card, is going to call, and he wants someone to answer on the other side of the phone because, it's his money. So a lot of people there, naturally a lot of people around data and marketing. We're around 60, I think, right now. Every week, we do a company meeting. There are like 10 new people every time.
Yeah.
So you need to think and understand the size of the team and the culture that you want to put in.
Yeah.
Not a James Bond culture anymore.
How would you describe the culture? Certainly the piece that you've architected, maybe just amongst the tech side or the company at large.
I think there are a lot of stories around the culture that you can describe, but at the end of the day, we're describing even when interviewing people, we describe the complexities our customers face around. It doesn't matter how much money you make. Okay, you can make $200K a year from freelancing, and you can make $50K a year from freelancing. At the end of the day, you'll still owe X% to the government. You'll still have issues with your taxes. You still won't categorize all your expenses, so you leave money on the table. You still invest time in doing that, in categorizing your expenses or building the tax report. And that time could either go to your family or can go to working more and earning money, because as a freelancer, every hour that you do you can translate it to a billable time. So it doesn't matter how much money you make, you still have the same problems. You still have the same set of problems. And we're describing those problems to those who we want to join in. And if they don't relate to the problem, they're not going to join.
So give me 3 words. If you had to boil it down, 3 words that describe Lili's culture, what do you choose?
Commitment to customers.
All right, that's one. That's 3 words right there.
That's 3 words right there. That's 3 words, and I think that's everything else is derived from that.
Yeah.
So
fair.
you want to be professional. You want to be nice people, and so on and so forth. But at the end, you want people who are committed to their customers, and everything goes from there.
How do you learn? I mean, going from a freelancer to CTO, running a company with 60 people and growing quickly, are there mentors that have helped you, or have you put a lot of thought into how you develop both technically and then as a leader in the company? Are there people, do you use Twitter, or do you read books or podcasts, or how do you kind of absorb information to grow personally?
Great question, actually. First of all, the fun thing about being the CTO of Lili is that I feel challenged every day. I feel every day that I need to do something new, be it, managing people or tech side or seeing customers' issues. Every day is like a new challenge, and that's exhausting, but it's fun as well. I wouldn't replace it for anything. And I read I read books. That's kind of me. I read more of history books, trying to learn from the past, I guess, and trying to get ideas and tips, and it gives me context, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Because don't they say history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes? I think is how the expression goes.
Yeah. Something like that. Yes. That's kind of where I am.
And do you focus on reading specifically for the context of like banking and fintech, or more do you focus on just the world, political, biological, anything historical? Are there specific areas that are more interesting to you from a historical perspective? I love history personally.
So we have a lot of comments. I focus mainly on leadership. I feel that the complexities that I have as a CTO in Lili right now are around leadership. How do you lead? What's the best way to lead and also grow? Let your team grow, because the easiest way to do is to say, well, I know things. Everything comes to me at the end of the day, and I'll do it. I'll sleep less. I'll wake up an hour earlier, and I'll do it. But it doesn't scale, and it doesn't give people the feel that they wake up, they go to work, they learn something new, they develop. And that's critical, because people come to work because they feel that they have nice people to work with and that they learn something. Otherwise, why would you get up? It's not just the money.
Yeah.
And how to create this commitment to customers and to product. That's the fun things about the job, and that's the fun things I read about. There's like this anecdote about World War II that Rommel, which was a German general, was fighting in North Africa against the British, and he was winning. He was constantly winning, and the British had a new general called Montgomery, I think. And he walked around the British soldiers, and he found out that more British soldiers know the names of the German general more than they know the name of the new British general. So he started wearing those weird hats so that everybody will know he was coming, and everybody will hear about him, and everyone will talk about him. And suddenly, when he said something, everybody said, well, Montgomery said that. And he turned out to be, one of the greatest generals the Western Allies had in the war. He won, naturally. He defeated Rommel in the specific battle that I mentioned. He won. And that's fascinating to see how a general can think outside the box and can rally the troops around him. Because at the end of the day, he's not in the trenches. He's not fighting.
Yeah.
He's not shooting.
Yeah.
But he needs to make sure that everyone works together in a very coordinated way, and they're willing to die for him.
What was it about that? So in that scenario, he shared the personal story or the details of the opposing general, and that was motivational?
He made himself someone that everybody talks about. Like there's no such thing as bad publicity. Everybody started talking about him. Now, that can be an urban legend. I don't know. I don't remember reading about it somewhere, whatever. But as a legend, even if it's a legend, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Because you expect a general to be like this, like this very strict person. And he said, I need people to talk about me. How do I go outside the box, outside my comfort zone, and start getting people to talk about me? And he managed to pull it off.
I like that a lot. It reminds me, do you ever read the book Art of War by Sun Tzu? It's a very old book. It's a good one. He describes a lot of the tactics and philosophies of war, but really of being a general and leading a group of people into battle. And certainly war and business are not the same thing, but in many ways they have many of the same structures to them. One example that comes to mind is he was significantly understaffed, accounted for. His army was a lot smaller than the encroaching army, and there was a reputation that he developed as being just an absolute savage to other armies. So they're approaching, and they have 5 times more people, and he tells all his troops to go into town, turn off the lights, duck down, don't do anything. And he goes and he just stands on top of like the castle doors and he just sits there in like his shorts and no shirt on. He's just sitting right outside, and the encroaching army sees this, and they're just so bewildered. They think it must be a trap. This guy must be somehow duping us in some way, and so they retreated, and they didn't even push forward. And it's like, you kind of it's sometimes thinking outside the box, playing the game, right? It's like, I find this. There was a company I started, and we raised $23 million. And we were in the home care space. So we would provide caregiving services, like a marketplace for caregivers, for seniors. And there was 3 other companies at the same time that all raised about the same amount of money. And there was kind of this game going on. It's like, I'm sure you can relate to this, where there's the actual tangible value you're delivering in the market. You have 400,000 customers, and they're doing this much revenue, and this is what the business metrics looks like. And that's great. That's the actual value delivered. Then there's the perceived value, which is in usually the venture community. So investors are sharing a deck. They're telling a story. They're talking about it. They're like, Liran, this guy is great, and the team is great. And they're going to, but sometimes they're drastically different. You can see this with startups who bubble, where they raise like $30 million on just an idea, and they don't go anywhere. For the most part, companies are aligned, but you'll see this scenario where it starts to become a big gap between what the venture community will perceive, and a lot of that what I call like venture valuation is what leads to success. It's what leads to you being able to raise more money, get more customers, because customers also, they'll Google, like, has this company raised money? Are they stable? It's like the perpetual motion, fake it till you make it kind of thing. Yeah. And I
think I think that's a great way of putting it. There is a perception of how well you do and what you're doing, and then good people want to come and join the team. One of our investors is Dovi Francis from Group 11. He does a lot of things in Israel. There's TV shows and ads and so on. And as an investor, he comes to talk to the team, and the team are crazy enthusiastic, and they're telling their friends, and their friends want to join. And you need to build this kind of culture that says we're the best. We're the Marines.
Yeah, we got the magic.
No one better. Yes, we've got the magic. God is on our side, and at the end of the day, it's not just a statement. It makes things come true.
Yeah, and I view the tip of the spear where that actualizes itself is in the minds of the people who started the company and who lead the company. Right, because it all flows up there, and it's like, if you can see that sparkle in someone's eye, it's like, guys, how can you possibly be on Facebook right now? Like, we have a chance of a lifetime to be building this thing, and it's like, it's the art of not being condescending. I personally like a management style that is so overwhelmingly optimistic and motivating that when people trip up, when they don't show up, you can talk to them privately about that, but not acknowledging it publicly, both for the purposes of not condescending someone publicly because they have their own reasons why they're struggling in whatever area they're struggling in, but also not bringing the group down. I think sometimes founders or managers will call people out or feel like they need to interject, and that tends to be almost like a cancer on the culture, where it starts to say, maybe we're not really onto it. Maybe we're slowing down, or, I should look for another job. And this
podcast won't be broadcasted live, so I'll give a surprise. It will probably be in hindsight, but so Friday afternoon, Israel time, I'm getting a message that says Log4j. So I'm writing in the Slack on the server and saying, you know what? I'm not sure that we have Log4j for us, but we'll fix it on Sunday. On Sunday morning, it will be good enough. take the weekend off, no need, and so on. But in my mind, I'm constantly thinking, well, maybe, and if we do have it and I'm not aware, then the impact is so big. So I wake up at 6 a.m. on a Saturday, and I think I can't get back to sleep right now. So I'm going downstairs and I want to fix it. And it turns out that one of the developers at 2 a.m. on Friday night released a patch, and it's just waiting for me to code review it and merge it and deploy it to production. And I'm saying, wow, this guy is amazing. And you want to do more than just say, wow, you're amazing in front of the whole team. So we have like this happy hour, and he's vegan. So the happy hour is going to be vegan, just, to give him the respect that he's earned. That. And I'm sure that some animals are very, very happy that he still stayed up all night on a Friday night and decided not to go out but write code. And at the end of the day, some cows and chickens are probably very happy.
Yeah, but it's a meaningful act of service. It's not just words of affirmation. It's a concrete, statement that, hey, this is a recognition that we're gonna eat this way in celebration of this person for doing this thing. And I know that feeling when you get somebody on the team who just kicks ass. It's like it's almost a thrill. I think that's I find personally the biggest. I'm curious you're what you find to be the most rewarding moments. But I find when you work with great people and they show up and they're just great in an area that you're not great in, especially I find. You just feel like you're like, wow, we're an organization, and we're strong in multiple areas, and it's a really cool feeling building a company that's strong and resilient with people who are excited to be there. Certainly, selling a company is exciting. Growth is exciting, new customers and partnerships, but I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel like the whole journey is about the people you're with on the inside.
First of all, I think that selling a company is a downer.
Yeah,
you bring up
it can be.
It's your kid. It's only it leaves the house. It's not your kid anymore.
Yeah.
I'm dreading this moment. But I agree. The best thing about Lili is to know that I was wrong in thoughts that I have, and that I've listened to the team. I said, I know I'm wrong. I know I might be wrong here. I need to listen to the expert, and to see that they were right. And that's like amazing. The feeling that you work with people who are smarter than you and you can learn from them, and that it's fun to have them around, and you're waking up with a smile in the morning to meet them. That's the only way to go, because it's so hard to build a startup. Definitely a bank, but it's so hard to build a startup no matter what.
Yeah.
You need good people to walk the road with you.
Totally agree. Although sometimes selling a startup is a very good thing. There's a lot of people who I think some people get, I've been there. You just feel burned out. You're like, I've been doing this for 6 years, whatever it is, and we're growing at a clip, but you stop feeling like you're growing as a person. I think it's usually the feeling like the company's taking more out of you than you're filling up your cup. And then, it's not a bad thing to sell a company and return on your investors and your employees. I'm curious, what's been the hardest part? So far, it seems like you were a freelancer, you had this idea, you build this company, it's going great. Were there moments of real challenge for you throughout the experience, or moments of doubt in the company, or was it just perfectly linear the whole time?
So, in 2009, I think, I built a startup with a friend, and it didn't work. We raised $15 million or so, and it didn't work out eventually. I was devastated. I think that I was depressed for a year or so. It was so difficult to even just get out of bed. So the emotional stress is huge, and it doesn't matter, even if you succeed, sometimes even the success is, so frightening. But we started Lili, and we wanted to raise our seed round. And I remember, walking in New York or meeting investors and telling them, well, banks should have business tools around inside, and it should, and people will love it, and it needs to work together. And they would say, no one would buy that. Either decide, oh, you want to build a business tool, or you want to build a bank, and don't mix it. Just do something else. And you hear so many no's that you're starting to think, maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm wrong in and I'm betting here. I have a mortgage, I have a family, I have obligations, and what am I gambling here? But luckily for us, the team was strong, and we gave each other strength, and the investors that eventually did this leap of faith also gave us a lot of strength and stood with us. There are always difficult times. There's regulatory experiences, there's fraud, there's hackers, there's so many things that can keep team members that can leave for whatever reason. It can be so difficult.
Yeah, even just having a family. I mean, I have a 1.5-year-old, and it changes the game, with kids around, and you have a house and, like you said, a mortgage. It's not, you got a couple of yourself, and when you're in your 20s, early 20s, you can I remember just cranking. I mean, I would go for a run, I would eat, and that would be it. And then I would just work, and it would just be there on a Saturday, Sunday, go for a longer run or take a drive. But it's different, you have other people in your life, and those people, need your time. So I find I just become more hyper efficient. Social media goes out, wasting time goes out the window, and you just become every 10 minutes of the day, you're thinking, what am I doing that's productive and useful or relaxing and entertaining and rejuvenating, but it's not wasted. Yeah.
Yes. What gave me strength today was I played poker with my youngest. And there's just this 15 minutes, it fills you with energy that I don't remember getting from anything else in my life prior to that. And it's so rewarding, and to keep this work-life balance thing in a startup is incredibly difficult. I'm not sure I'm doing a good enough job, but
did he take your money?
And it's so rewarding. So yeah, of course. I was texting throughout the game, and he was peeking at my cards, but
that's funny. One thing I wanted to ask you back on the business I forgot about, but I'm curious to learn from you. What's the scope of the market from a global sense? So you're in Israel physically. You're very active. The company's very active in the United States. You mentioned you don't pay much attention to Europe. Is Europe just too fragmented to really think about that as the early market? And do you think about other markets in some order, like US, Brazil, I don't know, what other top market, Australia, or how do you think about countries to launch in and how to prioritize those? And I imagine US is just big, so number one, there's just an appeal in that. But I'm curious if you have any inside information.
So, first of all, the freelance trend is global, right? Mm-hmm. It's not it's just in US. Some countries, it's a bit slower. Some are faster, but it's a global trend on one hand. But on the other hand, banking is so local. And so right now we're US only. We don't have any plans to go international or to launch in another country because basically that means rewriting or writing major parts of your application. It's not like I'm launching in a new IP address or something like that. It's very, very difficult.
Do your friends in Israel get? Do they ask you why you aren't live in Israel? I'd imagine.
Yes.
It's just not a big market, right? Is the
it's
downside
not a big market
of
in
Israel's?
Hebrew, but and the regulation is very difficult. But so the opportunity is not that big. But all of our friends who are freelancers here, they're just dying to get those features. But I won't tell them to relocate, but at some point,
But go on. I feel like I interrupted you there. So you're thinking about the U.S.
right?
being...
So we're focusing on the U.S. and that's the play right now. There are 60 million freelancers in the U.S., be it full-time freelancers or part-time freelancers. The trend is just growing. I feel we still have a long way to go. I feel that the feature set, the number of customers, we're leading the vertical that we're in. Like in war, we want to conquer the market, we want to conquer the world, but we need to start somewhere.
Do you think that the world is going to increasingly go towards freelance opportunity? Like, our kids' generation, say, if you're between 1 year old and 15 years old today, that by the time you really enter the workforce in your 20s, that the vast majority of your peers will be earning the most of their money from freelance gigs and jobs and social media, or do you see it the other way around, where more people are consolidating at big tech companies?
I feel the trend that we're seeing in Lili and all the surveys to show it and the researchers and so on is that the trend toward freelancer is very, very strong. Okay, there are multiple reasons for that. It can be I want to control my work-life balance in a better way. I don't want to feel I have a boss. I can totally relate, by the way. That was why I was a freelancer for many years. But also I want to diversify my risks. If I have multiple customers, then if one of them goes bankrupt, I'm not losing all of my income and I need to go look for a job. So there are a lot of reasons why people would go and become freelancers. And as my father, for instance, he worked in our parents' generation, worked in a single place most of their career, never changed a work place, and the workplace would never fire them. Basically, they would work there for 4 years, retire, and that's it.
What did he do?
50 years. Actually, my father is a bad example. He has a startup as well, and my brother as well. So, bad example. But theoretically speaking, you would work in the same place all your life, and that's no longer the case, right? No workplace will guarantee that you can work there for 40 years. And so people, I think people are just taking the same trend that workplaces are taking. They're not promising anything, and people will not promise anything as well.
I agree with you. Last thing I want to bring up, crypto. Do you have any plans from a business perspective to do anything in crypto or Web3, however you interpret that? Or do you personally get excited about crypto and blockchain projects?
Definitely crypto. I don't think there's a day we're not talking crypto in Lili. It's complicated. There is regulation around and so on, but at some point it will be fixed. And we feel that as a banking for freelancers, the ability of a freelancer to get paid in crypto is something that is required. And the bank can do a very good job around it. You'll have a US dollar balance, maybe a euro balance, and maybe a crypto, whatever currency balance that you like. So definitely at some point, hopefully very soon, we'll have crypto support. Me personally, we're mining crypto at home.
Cool.
that's the way my kid earns his driving lessons.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. And he bought or built his but a Bitcoin. What makes sense to mine? Bitcoin. Yeah, that's awesome.
Bitcoin account. Yes.
That's awesome.
Very funny. The fans, his computer fans are making a lot of noise, but he's having fun, and I think that's very interesting. I don't want to take it from him, so I'm letting him be the crypto guy at home.
And you pay the electricity bill?
Yes, that's a touchy subject, but yes, I pay the electricity. He earns money, and I pay the bills. Yes, that's
you got to look at it as an education. It's that's the way to write it off. Well, Liran, thanks so much. I really enjoyed our conversation, and congrats on all the progress with Lili. I wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. All right. Take care, my man.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Wait.